We have Richard with us. So Richard, I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, tell us about Our Little Planet, and just a quick introduction about yourself.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. So my name's Richard Joyner, currently living in Switzerland, but originally from Montreal, Quebec. Little Planet is, I started Little Planet in 2008, and its core, its nucleus is based on a small island in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, called Tioman, where we have an outdoor education facility, an outdoor center. We work almost exclusively with international schools from the region. And in the last sort of, I guess, 7 or 8 years, we've also expanded into different parts of the world here in Europe and in various countries in Southeast Asia as well, and South Asia. But principally, the vast majority of our programs take place in Tioman. We actually have 2 properties on the same bay, which are both beachfront properties. And so our programs very much take advantage of the ocean, the marine park, which is, Tioman Island is a designated marine park. So we have a thriving sort of marine ecosystem, and it's also a protected rainforest as well. So we have a primary rainforest as our backyard. The vast majority of our students are probably between the ages of 10 and 16 years old, kind of thing. So relatively speaking, a very broad range. The original sort of inspiration for Little Planet, what I wanted to create, I had some really formative experiences at summer camps, sort of North American style YMCA summer camps, which I worked from 2 summers, 17 and 18 years old, as a counselor, and then went back to a different YMCA camp at 22 as a section director. And in between had developed, my own personal guiding career. Back in the day, I was a relatively capable whitewater guide, doing mostly open canoe trips and so on. So that's my background. But with Little Planet, we were really trying to combine the feeling of a summer camp, the community and the residential feeling of a summer camp, with aspects of more sort of hard skill based outdoor education and so on. So taking kids on relatively short, but also very real expeditions. And, I say very real in the sense that, we're going into, again, tropical rainforest, primary jungle, which are not, it's not the easiest of conditions and so on. So that's what we do. I think that's probably, I'll stop there.
That's interesting. Just one question about that. Did you say how many years did you say you've been doing this for, that company?
Little Planet. I started Little Planet in 2008.
2008.
The summer of 2008, we worked with a school that had just opened in Singapore. One of the big, it's a school called St. Joseph's, which is one of the big old school private schools in Singapore that in that era, 2007, 2008, were given licenses to open international campuses. So I think there were 3 old school private schools in Singapore that were then allowed to open international arms, and that was our first client, really. We had 3 groups of 50 kids come to us, so we had 150 kids over the course of 3 weeks, and we ran a 5-night program where the kids were sea kayaking and trekking and all of that good stuff.
Very nice.
Very nice. Yeah, sounds like a very interesting project. Can you talk a little bit about the roles or the jobs that are necessary to run an outdoor education center like that one?
Yeah, I'll kind of just compartmentalize things as well, because we own the centers and so on. So I'll exclude. We have kitchen staff, we have resort staff, people maintaining the property and all of the facilities and so on. But we'll just concentrate on the program side of things. I lived on site for a long time. I lived on site from 2008 to 2017. And I very much took on the role of sort of camp director, if you will, being very present, giving a lot of sort of the welcome briefings, overseeing the instructors and the, whatever you want to call them, camp counselors, instructors, guides, all of that stuff. So the way that we would structure it, we would have lead guides at a ratio of 1 to 12, basically, and then we would support them with assistant instructors and people that were responsible also for logistics type things as well. If you wanted to put names on it, you could, kind of like a porter or people, oftentimes people that were very familiar with the area as well, often tied into the local community. So obviously spoke the native language and could really get things done, and people so a lot of times we would bring in guides from, let's say, the United States or Canada or the UK, or, we're working with international schools. So everything was happening in English. And the expectation was that our guides would be able to operate, in English fluently and not only conduct these activities, but also deliver educational content and curriculum. So we would bring people in that weren't necessarily that familiar with the location. They would have these hard skills. They would have the background. They would have done this type of work in a lot of different environments, and we're often very adaptable. But we would support them with people with profound local knowledge and so on. But that was the main thing. You'd have your lead instructors, your assistant instructors, and then you would have your sort of, we leaned on a lot of the resort staff to help with, things like transportation or this or that, or moving gear around and so on and stuff like that. And then there was me who, now I've been replaced by what we call our operations manager. And he also has kind of like his deputies, his lead guides as well. Things have also expanded quite a bit for us. So when we were running programs in the early days, 50, 60 kids at a time was a big number. And it would only happen, we probably had 3 or 4 programs like that a year. So maybe we were operating 6, 7 weeks out of the year, something like that. Whereas now we're dealing with, we've got groups of, more than 150 kids at a time, sometimes in multiple locations. And so obviously in order to scaffold that or scale it or whatever you want to call it, you have to appoint these, you obviously have to designate this and identify trip leaders and program managers and stuff like that. So that's what we've done.
So when you're doing that hiring for those particular roles, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the more desirable skills that you look for in, let's say, one of your trip leaders? Are there certain skills or certifications or something that would set somebody ahead of somebody else within your company?
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of times it's the full package. You know what I mean? It's not one thing by any means. I would say that a lot of times it's also word of mouth. So someone has come with a recommendation. Someone has contacted me and said, "Hey, listen, so-and-so, would you mind if they sent you a CV," kind of thing. And that's a really strong and powerful kind of qualifier. For I'm on the lookout. I know this person, someone who's, someone whose opinion I value is putting their, their neck on the line or whatever. They're vouching for someone. So that is a really important thing. And then it's everything, it's the nature of that email, the first sort of thing, how that's structured. It's nice to see sort of still kind of that formal thing, even in this day and age with everything shorthand and messages and all of that stuff. It's nice to see, dear so-and-so or hello and a brief little introduction, something relatively formal, signing off. Maybe a cover letter. I find the cover letter is not always, okay, it's nice. And if someone's gone through that, then great. But I've had people send me just cover letters. They're sort of explaining themselves and not to sound too important or whatever, but I don't have the time to go through a 300-word letter and decipher, what's important or whatever. You want to see still a very bullet-pointed, laid-out CV that looks good as well. I think, if it's just a straight up Word document, just a real text-based document, nowadays people are putting a little bit more effort into it, and there's templates and there's all this stuff. There's ways for it to look good.
And what about once they're working for you? Are there any particular skills or behaviors that you would find more desirable? Like what types of if somebody, are there certain certifications that you require from your employees or any type of training that is desirable for them to have?
Again, I mean, it's not a simple answer, but the only thing that we have as a sort of a basic, must have is a comprehensive first aid qualification.
Okay.
And then we look at what responsibility are we giving these people. If they're going to do water-based things, if they're going to do kayaking, they're going to do this, it's activity-specific certification. Working in a developing country or, working in Southeast Asia and so on, we've had to take a lot of that training in-house. So we do preparation and so on before programs and everything like that. So we can fill the gaps if people don't have formal qualification. But for sure, let's say a paddle sports qualification from the BCU, from the ACA or something like that. If people have leave no trace qualifications, we take kids into the jungle. We want to teach them low impact, methodology with regards to just sort of backcountry travel and so on. So that type of thing, any relevant certification, even, a lot of this stuff as well, we're taking kids snorkeling and so on. So if people have a PADI snorkeling certification or, even not necessarily better, but if they're an advanced diver or they're a rescue diver, or they're a dive master, all of that stuff is, demonstration that they're competent and they're capable of doing that. My background as well with whitewater and a lot of this stuff I think is still totally relevant is a lifeguarding certification, a first aid certification, and then with river-based stuff, a swiftwater rescue certification. That was kind of like the three type things, And nowadays as well, in the last decade, a lot of sort of soft skill stuff as well, safeguarding courses, facilitation courses, things like that, cultural sensitivity for us as well. We're trying to tie into curriculums now with international schools. A lot of that has to do with understanding the sustainable development goals, understanding global citizenship, understanding macro concepts like that. So, and more, there are ways to go and get certifications and do courses. There's multiple risk management courses out there now. There's, and we have people that have been doing this for 20 years. We have people that I look at their resumes and they eclipse mine, you know what I mean, in terms of certifications and all of that stuff. But then on the flip side of that as well, you look at a CV and you need to see experience that you recognize from institutions and organizations that you value as well, right? Again, it's not a straightforward answer, but I think all of those things combined.
So with European Center of Adventure Training, I think what we offer is definitely a pathway into an organization like yours. And so anyways, very interesting to hear your story and your business. And I just want to thank you today for your time, and let's keep in touch.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks
Okay.
very much, Thomas and Jackie.
Thank you, Richard.
Best of luck.
Very nice
Bye,
talking to you.
Richard.
Okay. Bye-bye.
If you think you'd like to work in the outdoor industry, but you're not really sure what you would do, head to our website and we have a free assessment that you can fill out, and we will help you determine that.
To learn more about our training programs, visit our website or sign up to our newsletter.